Well, g'day T, how are we?
I'm good, thanks B. I can't believe it's been a week since last time we talked.
Time does go very fast.
It does.
Especially
And
when you get as old as we are.
that's right, it starts to completely go fast because woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath because he knows the time is short. That's the beginning of Number of the Beast,
This
Iron Maiden.
is it?
Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast.
What a great song, though. I do remember that. Here we are, episode 6. And episode 6, we are going to call Why Does the Devil Have All the Good Music? Which I've just been informed again, wealth of knowledge, this T bloke. That was a Cliff Richard song.
Yep, Cliff Richard did a version of that, definitely. He is a born-again fundamentalist.
Yes. Is he still?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he may have mellowed, who knows, but he certainly was.
You would hope he has mellowed. I think you should talk, like you did in the last episode, a little bit to our online presence, some of the tools available. You are the king of our online presence. Our downloads are creeping up there.
Yeah, definitely.
Quite a few downloads.
We're starting to get people subscribing, and we're starting to see people interact with us online. So you can download this. We release every Saturday.
Yeah.
Australia time. We've even got people from overseas downloading, which is nice. So add a day, or take away a day, I should say. Yeah. And we're also on Facebook, where there's a group. There's a Facebook page and a Facebook group. So feel free to join those and connect with us. And we're not going to be extremely strong on censorship or anything, so you don't have to agree with us. You can argue with us, whatever. We may not argue back, but you're welcome to come along and be a part of the chat.
Yeah, look, I'm probably committed to not arguing back because, I've been on both sides of the coin, as have you, and I definitely want to respect people's opinions and what they say, and we all come with our own stuff. Yep. Everyone's got their own stuff.
Exactly right.
I think this topic is a very big one. Music was a big part of the church scene, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's because, it's not just because, there is a history of music within church. I think the whole idea of churches getting together and singing songs came from once upon a time people used to go down to pubs or into the town square, and they would get together and they would sing songs.
Yep.
And then what happened was when churches looked at how can we get people together, they would just imitate what the inverted commas world was doing, which was getting together and singing songs. And interesting, the world has sort of stopped doing that. That we don't go to each other's places. I mean, maybe if you're Chinese or Japanese and you want to sing karaoke, but largely we don't get together and sing. But churches still do.
Yeah,
they get together and they sing, and they you certainly watch bands and all that kind of stuff within churches as well. But definitely the idea of that sort of communal singing and choral singing.
Well, I think music still brings people together, regardless of whether we sing or not together. I often think whenever I have people over or a few friends over, music always goes on. Well, I do like to sing, and people like to leave when I sing. So it's I don't know if there's a correlation. I choose to believe there's not. But no, I always put music on the background.
Music is a big part of your life. I mean, it's a big part of my life too, right?
Oh, it's a huge part of my life.
But it is a huge part of your life, yeah.
Oh, I still got a lot of gigs to this day.
Yeah.
I've always been drawn to music, and music speaks to me. Like I definitely connect with music. I find it a very emotional experience. But I also find that it can lift my mood, it can change my mood in many negative and positive ways. And I think over time I've learnt how to control music rather than music control me. Okay.
And it can also distract, can't it? Like, you can put on music and it can distract you from whatever it is that's getting you down or whatever. Well,
back in university, because you'd study in a communal setting, I quite often would put music on and write essays and reports and whatever. To this day, I still have to do that at work. If I've got a report to write or, a paper of something to present, I have to have music to help me. It's really interesting, but it's a powerful part of my life. And
so it's no surprise that fundamentalist churches took music as something very, very important, right? And even the secular music, right? Being secular meaning, not of the church.
Yeah.
They were very preoccupied with that. And talking about, again, being primed, before I joined any sort of church, I was already exposed to the idea of backward masking as a kid.
Yes.
That if you play this music backwards, forwards, whatever, but something about playing the music backwards, and somehow it would influence you because the devil would put secret messages inside music, and that was a Christian thing. That came from Christians, right?
Yeah, I was exposed to it too, and when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, absolutely sticking the record on and whacking it backwards, and that was well before I had any exposure to the church. So definitely did. It leaked out.
Yeah. I had friends of mine and I who would we got right into the Beatles, and there was all this backward stuff apparently in the Beatles, but they were the Beatles would actually put it on backwards, right? Like, and then you play it forwards, like Revolution Number 9 on the White Album. It's but then you play it backwards, and it does say "Turn Me On, Dead Man." It says number 9. You play it backwards, and it's clear as day. It goes, "Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man." And it sounds, other parts of it, it sounds just like someone speaking Russian. But there's no message from the devil in that.
No. Well, why would the devil?
Well, he gets all the good music.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he does get all the good music.
He gets all the good music. So when I was in the revival centres, music wasn't of the devil. You could listen to whatever music you wanted, as long as it wasn't. Yeah, as long as it wasn't swearing and carrying on forwards.
Yep. Okay.
So again, I think I mentioned in the last episode, they just weren't big on the devil.
Yep.
The devil was not really a big part of revival centres. But when I came into Great Big AOG, you weren't allowed to listen to secular music. It was like, no, we don't. It's not like anyone would come down on you. It was just the culture, the peer pressure and everything was, you listen to Christian music and the end.
I remember once my brother was in the car with me, and it was probably after 2 years of my conversion time, and it had been a rocky up and down, and I remember putting some music on that wasn't Christian music. I didn't listen to any Christian music. I remember him tearing.
Yeah, no one knew it was Darryl Braithwaite.
No, back then
Cold Chisel.
It was Cold Chisel.
It was Cold Chisel,
and I remember it, and I remember it was a tape. It was a tape. It was that long ago, and I remember him ripping it out of the tape deck and putting this artist in called Keith Green.
Oh, Keith Green, yeah.
And
I was a big Keith Green fan.
Well, I hated it. I ripped that tape out. I threw it in the back seat.
Put this love in my heart.
I became a big Keith Green, and I read the book
No Compromise.
No Compromise many times.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, I had the audio book on tape. I used to buy that book and give it to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great book. And it was, it really, because I think it had the mix of music and story, and I love a biography. That was a big one. But music was, I found myself particularly in the first few years of my journey in churches, judging a church that I went into by its music. So it was, how professional was it? How much of a tight outfit was it? All that sort of stuff. So, It was definitely something that was highly influenced. And I mean, one thing in Great Big AOG that they were heavily involved in was this thing called Youth Alive. And Youth Alive used to be held at the entertainment centre.
Sports and entertainment centre,
Big one, that was enormous. And they would get plenty of people along, and I think sometimes it would run over 2 nights, didn't it? Oh, I can't remember. I don't know. But there was lots of people, lots of excited young people in there, and the draw card was music. They would
basically put on huge concerts, as if it was back in the day, as if it was Bon Jovi, or if it was Duran Duran, or if it was whoever. That they would. It was on par in terms of lights and sound and all that kind of stuff. Certainly not in terms of the actual performance, but the as I said, the lights and the sounds and the atmosphere and everything was a rock concert.
Well, and I remember one thing that stands out. I became relatively involved in that space. Tommy Emmanuel, famous guitarist in Australia, he became a Christian, and so he became a draw card at this Youth Alive. They got him along. He played guitar, and he beautiful instrumentalist, and he played Imagine
by John Lennon.
Yes. I don't know if you remember this.
I do. Yes, I've reflected on this a number of times and wondered, what was he up to?
Yeah. And you know, the controversy, he was obviously never invited back because, as you know, one of the famous lines in it, imagine there's no heaven.
Basically, he
no
says,
hell
imagine
below
if there's
us.
no religion.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he does say that, and no religion too, right? Yeah.
So
But that's what I'm asking. What was Tommy? Because Tommy Emmanuel would know that that's what it says.
yeah, but or was it complete naivety and thinking this is a beautiful piece of music? Because it is. It is such a beautiful piece of music, and he.
I don't think so.
I
don't think it's naivety.
You're
because
going the controversy here.
yeah, because would you be invited to speak or sing or play guitar or whatever, and actually play a song that is directly challenging religion and the need for religion in the world at a religious event? I don't think you'd do that by accident.
I think you're missing the point that he was oppressed by a demon.
Ah, right.
So
right. Well, that was last episode.
Go back to episode 5 and you'll see
right.
that. No, and look, whatever was behind it, I mean, it was pathetic that he never got invited back because of that. Maybe, maybe he was a tool of the devil too. Who knows?
I'm just wondering, was he... No, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think he was up to something because he was so big then. He was such a huge name.
Enormous.
That why would he bother, going along to a Youth Alive rally and say, there's a shit, ding, ding.
Yeah, that's right. And he was really into it, I mean, I think he was...
Yeah, he had a real conversion story, hadn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I think a deconversion story a few years later.
Was it?
Yeah. From what I understand, I don't know him, but that's from what I understand around the rumour mill. Yeah. Maybe it was all started from the fact that he played Imagine.
Yeah, played Imagine,
know.
yeah.
But there was a huge thing. There was a lot of excitement. I think we spoke about in one of our earlier episodes about that need to save souls. And that's what this night was all about. And I remember being a salvation counsellor at these events. Yeah. So you would have these kids who would make a decision that they were going to follow Jesus, and that was their night of their conversion. They would then go back into a large section at the back of this stadium, and you would have salvation counsellors who would sit around, and essentially what you were doing was getting their contact details, making sure they got connected up with a church in their area.
Church,
yeah. And that was yourself.
But there were packs we'd give them too.
There was packs.
With little tracts and how to stay saved and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. And I remember you'd open up to them and go, well, so has anyone got any questions about what's just happened? And most of them were 13, 14, 15 and had no questions because they were blinded by the lights of the music.
Yeah.
So,
but the music was... Are you saying that music was manipulative?
Look, I think they used it as a tool to bring people in. But if I reflect upon the manipulation of it, absolutely. I mean, if you looked at the stages of how they did it, there would be a hype. There would be they come out with a bang. They get everybody into it.
We will fight. Dun, dun, we will win. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Absolutely. And people would be into it. And it was like one giant karaoke session. And then they would have a message, a very pointed message. And then you would have, you could time it every time. There would be always someone who would sneak around the back of the stage, hop onto a keyboard, another one on a guitar.
And start playing a really heavy string sound, right?
Really
wah,
heavy.
Wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
Build the emotion.
Yeah.
And the emotion would be built, and then you would have a call or an altar call for people who wanted to come forward.
But you know what? You're skipping a stage. And one of the stages was before they would do that whole talk and bring, they would have the praise and worship time. So it'd start with bum, we will fight, we will win, we will destroy, yeah. But then it would go into, refresh my heart, and all that kind of stuff, And it was all that sort of soft, gentle, sappy sort of songs. And then, the kids would start raising their hands and people would be singing in tongues. And it became this sort of... And we would stand there in the crowd.
Yeah.
Singing to God, like picturing God in our mind and reaching out and singing, looking upwards and singing out. And there was this whole sense of building to something, this, lifting up and but in a really sort of soft way. And then, that's when they would hope that the Holy Spirit would come.
Yes.
and fall on, on everyone and soften hearts and all that kind of stuff. And then they'd go into the sermon, and then they would do the altar call and the string sound. And
That's true. And, I did forget, and quite often it was divided into praise, which is the
praise is
high
fast,
energy, and then the worship,
which is people on keyboards are doing heavy strings sound.
Absolutely.
And the reason I keep talking about the heavy string sound is because later, when I was doing my own preaching and youth pastoring and all that kind of stuff, I knew.
Oh,
Time for the strings.
100%.
And then you talk quietly over the strings as well. Yeah.
Oh, I remember probably the first time that I led the praise and worship session. I remember using manipulative tools in it, and I consciously did it. Like I remember actually thinking, okay, this is where I've got to get the drummer. I've got to point at the drummer, and I've got him to just do a solid beat, and then I've got to bring in the guitar, and then I'll bring in.
So you're building it slowly. You're building
100%.
that crescendo up. You're building that impact.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I knew how to do it because I'd seen it 100 times.
Yeah.
And I consciously did it because it was learnt behaviour. I thought that's what you had to do. That's how you actually had an impact. So it was, and there's a factory. There's a factory of musicians which pump out the most successful of this praise and worship, which of course in Australia is Hillsong.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that whilst we're going to sit here and talk about being part of Great Big AOG, people would say, oh, you're not, you were never in Hillsong. But when we were in Great Big AOG and in the Assemblies of God, Hillsong was a part of the Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
And so they weren't a church. They were a music conference that used to happen at Hills Christian Life Centre every year, and people from all over Australia, including our church, would all get excited. And have you been to Hillsong yet? This conference that would happen every year. And then the leader of Hillsong was actually the head of the AOG.
Yes.
Brian Houston. He was the head of the AOG for a while before. And then I don't even know the whole story about why they broke away and when they broke away. But certainly that whole using music in that way, we were there at the conception of that.
Yeah.
I think we should get badges and T-shirts. We were there.
We absolutely were there, and it was hugely influential. Did you ever go to Hillsong?
No,
to the conference?
I never went to Hillsong, but I would listen to Brian speak because I was in Bible college and, upcoming leader and all that kind of stuff. So I used to go to conferences where he was leading.
Yes.
He wasn't in charge of the AOG then,
Yep.
but he was still a high flyer.
Yeah.
And so, he would come and speak. And there was another guy, Jeff Bullock, who used to
of
write all
course.
this music.
Yeah, I forgot about him.
And
Darlene Check.
Darlene Check was another one, and these were all AOG people, you know. And so we'd go to Youth Alive rallies and Youth Alive events, and they would be there.
Yep.
And they were just people. They were just part of the furniture because they weren't yet. And I'm just speculating here. I'm not exactly sure how much money they make now, but they weren't yet making millions.
Yeah.
As individuals, let alone as churches.
And, do you think they? I mean, it's speculative, of course, but I think they went into it probably with good intention.
Yeah, I think so.
And went in there and probably,
as did we.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, fame just came to them. They became very, very famous within the circle, and probably started to be outside of that too when it was hitting. It was on 60 Minutes here several times. About the influence of Hillsong and
right. Well, the Prime Minister. Now, dating this podcast to 2021, he is a member of Hillsong.
Yeah.
Right? He goes to that church. So their influence is phenomenal.
Is it Hillsong or Planet Shakers that he's part of?
Hillsong.
It is Hillsong, yeah.
Hillsong.
I'm not sure. I've never paid any attention.
Planet Shakers is still AOG.
Is it?
But it's basically, I think Hillsong left and Planet Shakers went, well, we're going to do this too,
Yeah.
But nevertheless, right? So using music, we digress. Using music in that way... you talked about the difference between praise and worship, and I can remember I was allowed to lead the praise, but I wasn't allowed to lead the worship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I could do the fast songs, but I couldn't do the slow songs.
And I do have a recollection of a time that we got involved in these O teams, I think they're called, outreach teams, and we would go to smaller fledgling churches as they were. Really starting to get off the ground because we came from Great Big AOG. We were the experts.
It was great and fucking big.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And let us come and impart. So, there'd be a group, and the group would consist of someone who led the praise and the worship, or praise or worship. There was someone who would preach, and you would essentially do the whole thing. And I think you were trying to teach them how to do it. Or they saw that you were coming from Great Big AOG and thought, my God, this is amazing. Someone actually paying attention. But I remember this one time, you got very...
This one time on Bandcamp?
It was close to that. But you were really into it, and you were good at it. You were good, and I'm sure to this day...
I was a master manipulator.
You were great, but
not just with songs, with sermons too. Keep going.
But I remember this one, and you went off. There's an artist here in Australia, Jimmy Barnes. Google him. Just have he's a little bit of a rock singer. And Jimmy Barnes likes to really slam into a song and rock his body around. And you did a Jimmy Barnes while you were doing a praise song.
Yeah.
And the praise song was called Jesus, Lover of My Soul.
Yeah.
And you were going off. You turned that into something else.
Yeah.
And I remember looking around and people were really into it. And I remember looking at you going, what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, that was all performance.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. But also, I was enjoying myself. That was what was happening in that moment, know.
It was great.
And it's funny because after, I don't know if it was that one or another one where I did a similar thing, one of the pastors came up to me and, prophesied that God was going to use me in music. Right? And I was like, no, I'm going to be a pastor.
I'm going to preach.
Yeah, it's more about control and power than it is about status, because those singers and everything, whilst they were in one hand they were idolized and lauded, at the same time though they were tier B, compared to the pastors and the preachers and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, I remember wanting to be a pastor, because it was the ultimate tier.
I can remember being in church one day, and just retreating into my own head, but at the time I was having a moment with God where I felt God was asking me what I wanted to do. Do you want to be a singer or do you want to be a preacher? And I was like, no choice, God. I want to be the preacher.
I thought you were going to say you wanted to be a singing preacher.
Singing preacher, well, yeah, but no.
Life is a musical.
Yeah, but that was the choice. Because yes, music will manipulate, but not as much as power will.
No, absolutely. I want to go back to something we started at the start of this podcast, was talking about the influence of music and how you couldn't listen to worldly music. What was the impact that had for you?
When I stepped into Great Big AOG, there was a number of sort of barriers, there's sort of hurdles that you jump to get closer and closer in, right? So, going to a home group, going to youth. And another one was dealing with worldly music. Quitting smoking and drinking was part of it as well. But dealing with worldly music. Now, I had a really nice music collection, vinyl, even to the point where I had gotten rid of cassettes to purchase vinyl of the same albums, that kind of stuff. So I was really into heavy metal. So I had things like Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, the Beatles and stuff. I had a Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band picture disc. Right, like full picture disc of Sgt. Pepper's, which I'd bought overseas. The whole, I had a really nice collection. Burnt them all. Gave it all to Jesus, and set fire to it. And my mother, who wasn't involved, was mortified. Because this collection was worth a lot of money. And I torched it all, and did not listen to secular music for probably from about 1990 till about 1995. If I heard it on the radio or at a shopping centre or something, fine. But I didn't buy albums. I didn't tune into the radio myself. It was all Christian music.
And I remember when you came out the other side of that, I remember a conversation. I mean, you used to try and shit stir people with that too, because you knew it triggered them. And I remember being at a wedding with you, and you were asking people out of the blue whether they'd heard the new Oasis album.
Because I left Great Big AOG before you did.
Yes, you did.
But I was still sort of on the fringes a little bit and everything. Yeah, totally.
And
because for me, taking that back, I mean, this is a whole nother episode, right? But taking that back and saying, this is actually what I enjoy, this is who I am. Look, I was similar, as we said before, music's always been a huge part of my life. I had a huge
music collection as well.
Yes, I'm going to hang my head in shame here. Go and tell the story for the listeners.
And it's fairly significant. And I'd had this. I remember this one album I had. It was a cold chisel album called "You're 13, You're Beautiful in Your Mind." It was
which nowadays #MeToo would probably not.
It would not be popular. However, I bought that back in the 80s, probably the mid 80s, and I paid about $150 for it back then. Very limited. Not many of these around. This was perfect. Never been played. But that was just one of hundreds and hundreds of albums and compact discs I had at the time. I used to buy at least 2 CDs every week with my pay or a vinyl. But I loved my music, and I still love it. And as I said before, I found it really difficult to latch onto Christian music at first because it bored me. Like, I really loved the music I had.
And I can remember, because I didn't have a car and you used to drive me places, and I'd get in your car and you would be playing secular music.
Yes.
And I was like, what? You know, I didn't say it like this, but in retrospectively, I was, what the fuck? Why is this guy in leadership and, youth leadership and doing all this sort of stuff, and obviously got a heart for God and everything, and we hop in to his car and he's putting on Daryl Braithwaite, or he's putting on Cold Chisel, or he's putting on, Frente, whatever. And it was just like...
Yeah.
So
we went on I think we had a couple of days of fasting and prayer retreat.
Did we?
Yes,
we
did.
I don't remember this.
And I remember you delivering a word from God at that time, saying that I needed to rid myself. If I wanted to be closer to God, I needed to rid myself of that music collection.
Did I really? Oh, I'm so sorry.
No.
I didn't realise I did that. I thought I just came to you off the, one day and said, hey, man, as a concerned person. But I actually brought God and manipulated you.
Had a word.
Awesome.
But you probably thought it was the right thing to do.
Well, I totally thought it was the right thing, and I still do.
And I was ripe for the picking, because I went, you know what? Yeah, I don't think I can get closer to God.
I knew MP3s were coming. It was all fine.
That was the moment where I went home and I destroyed my music collection. I broke every single one of my records, my compact discs. I destroyed.
It wasn't enough to give them away. We had to actually destroy them.
You couldn't give them away, because then you're giving it to someone else, and you're invoking those issues to them. I remember then I built up a huge Christian music collection, and much like you, I reckon it was from about 1990, maybe 91, 92, but maybe through to 96, 97, predominantly, I only listened to Christian music because I thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, so I can remember you were into Steve Camp.
Yes.
Steve Curtis Chapman.
Yeah. Keith Green.
Keith Green, yeah.
Yeah. But also a lot of alternative Christian music. There was a band called Mad at the World. Okay. Used to really like them. The Swirling Eddies, the Rockin' Rabbis.
I don't know any of this.
Yeah, so it was very, very, very alternative. And you know what? I've still got those discs at home.
Okay.
So, but it was probably about 96, 97. I turned back again and went, you know what? I'm going to start building my non-Christian music collection back up.
Screw false promises.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it was all part of the journey, and it's whatever. In the end, it's material possessions, and it's gone, and to compensate, we do have Spotify.
But remember, we moved from vinyl to CDs, and then people now have gone back to vinyl. I get that, but it's all there on Spotify, so we didn't end up losing anything really.
We didn't.
But it speaks to something deeper.
We lost our religion.
Well, yeah. Well, which at that point was music. But you know what I'm saying? It speaks to something deeper, which was that music was so powerful, the church saw it as a threat.
Yes.
And so they had to sever us from those voices, from those influences. They felt they did.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's all those things to fear. But, I mean, this is a massive topic. And I reckon we could 100% do, part 2, 3 and 4 of this. Who knows? Who knows what we'll bring up later on. But it's an interesting one, and it's one that is dear to my heart. So,
yeah, cool. All right. Well, that sounds good to me. Let's make this another one of these part ones where we can talk about music and those kinds of things later. I would also like to one day do an app and we talk about Hillsong and stuff like that, because whilst we weren't actually there when they exploded, we were there at the beginning, and I think we've got some perspective to bring on Hillsong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not going to be sequential. Music part 2 won't be next week. It'll be another time.
Yeah, exactly right.
Just like we will just keep on mixing it up. So,
totally.
but thank you everyone for listening.
Look us up on Facebook, jump into the group, have a chat, find us on your favourite podcast. Another thing I'd like to say, it's going to sound, typically people that make podcasts say this, but tell your friends about us. If you think that what we're saying is valid or interesting, tell your friends about us. Subscribe to us on your favourite podcast platform, and also give us a rating, because that actually brings us up in the search results when people search for us.
And, if you don't like us, then give it to an enemy. Spruik us, say, hey.
Give us 1 star rather than 5.
Yeah, that's right, but just give us some. But no, appreciate it, and appreciate everyone's support to date. It's great.
Yeah,
Catch you soon.
All right, see you next week.